And welcome in Vertical Pursuit. I am Mike Barrett. He is Mike Tatlock, and this is a podcast, webcast. What is the proper terminology? Anyway, I guess it doesn't really matter, but welcome in. And this is the podcast that we had been envisioning for a long time and have gotten off the ground and have heard good things from people who have listened and watched and kind of unapologetically aimed at men and aimed at men who are living and trying to survive our time. And by saying for men, and we've said this before, it doesn't mean that we're excluding anybody. And in fact, the women of the men who have watched and listened have said, thank you. Because this benefits everybody. And you've talked about this before, keeping men on track. And hopefully living the right way is vital, and people understand that.
I think I love that you said that, because I know we are focused on men, but with women in mind as well. And, you know, I've been a pastor for 26 years, and I hear women all the time saying, man, I wish there was something for my husband. And so, and whether they're married or not, men are going through interesting things right now. And if we can help empower men, encourage men, build them up, then they become better husbands, better dads, better fathers, friends, and all that kind of stuff. So we're focused on men, but the scope of reach is going to go way beyond that.
And I said this in maybe a previous episode or maybe in another interview, talking about, you saying there's not anything for men. And when we had kids, this was 16, 17 years ago, it was the mom this and this jog group and this walk group and then mom and me. And then, my wife was in more groups and some around the church, some just friends, and then the wine group, and then this group. And then I'm just kind of out on my own. And part of that's my doing, part of that's my fault, but there just aren't as many things. And I don't think maybe naturally we are as bent to want to do that. But I think opportunities. And then I have friends now, and now I'm already getting sidetracked, and we've been on for less than 5 minutes, but I've got friends now who want this. They want that group. They want that community. And when presented with it, they love it. But it doesn't slap you in the face like it does maybe for the women.
Right. Absolutely. And I think a lot of things are happening now culturally. Every generation has to face their challenges. So what do men face today that's unique to what we're going through? And I feel like a lot of men are waking up every day, and there's I feel like life, culture, society, the world has all these landmines, and guys are stepping on landmines. And there's a lot of men out there who are just getting destroyed. They're wounded. They're discouraged. They're giving up. And it's like, how can we help them navigate that? And how can we, and I think that's the hope of this podcast and video guys, like, how do we help men navigate some of those challenges they're facing?
Well, and sometimes we have guests, which we have had. Sometimes it's great to not have guests because I want to pick your brain, and you've got a ton of experience at this. And as you said, you're a pastor and you're an NBA team chaplain. And so part of that is that you help not only men in the church and otherwise men in the community, but you also help these professional athletes where they are at a young age on a stage that is unforgiving. We know that. And so I know that's a valuable resource for them to have. And we have mentioned this before, but I was fortunate enough during my time in the NBA to be able to be in some of those chapel services, those pregame services. That if a lot of people don't know, it involves both teams at the same time. And it's this fellowship, which has a short message. I think they're 15 minutes long.
Yeah, that's it.
And I think and I'll let you talk about this, but what you're doing is kind of arming these guys with hopefully some perspective. And it becomes a very valuable thing for them to carry into battle, if you want to put it that way. And I know we do that as men, but also arm them for life and hopefully give them a solid foundation rather than sand. And so that is a huge opportunity. And that's why I say, as much as we're not having a guest, we kind of are because you have so much experience at this. And I think there's a lot of valuable things that can come from it.
Well, and I think, and just to, a lot of this comes out of our friendship and comes out of, again, last night, we've talked about this, sitting around the fire with Jim, our friend, and we talk about these things. We get real and honest with each other. I think everybody doesn't have access to that. And so maybe even through this, we are inviting guys to join us into that deep level of connection, talking. And you talk about, helping guys, whether they're pro athletes, whether you're, a young adult going to college, whether you're a grandfather 60 years old. I think for a lot of guys, the Bible talks about that the life that we live is a battle. And I think a lot of guys are facing battles, but they're not equipped for the battle. And I mean, we all know the picture, like you've been to a sports game, and especially like a football where there's a field and some dude goes running out in the nude suit. Yeah. Everybody knows that image, right? He's out there and we're all cheering for him. Yeah. we're all cheering for him. Security's chasing him down.
Usually had a few pops.
Totally. Yeah. Like it's probably sometimes the best part of the game. But the point of that is, like, I think a lot of us imagine going to a battle, like a real battle in war, and you see soldiers show up wearing a bunch of nude suits.
Right.
That's how a lot of guys are facing their battles every day. They have no armor. They don't know. They're going into battles at work, battles in their marriages, battles at home and relationships, wherever it's at, and they're just not equipped. They're not outfitted to engage, and to engage with victory, to overcome on the other side. So I think that's kind of what we've been kind of rapping about a little bit here is, how do we help guys engage in the battle to be equipped and to overcome?
So let's back up a little bit. And, we like to hit on topical items, and something that's been in the news a lot is this Supreme Court nomination, the hearings going on, and something that, it doesn't take much now on social media for something to get out there and everybody seizes on it. And so the prospective Supreme Court justice was asked, what is a woman? Mm-hmm. And had a hard time answering that, and everybody seized on that. I don't know what that means. I'm not a biologist. That was the quote. Mm-hmm. So then it got me thinking, and as we've kind of talked about, so what is a man? Yeah. And from our perspective, and maybe even from a biblical perspective, and I know today you've talked about men under attack and masculinity, I think, under attack for whatever that means. Right. And we even tried to dissect that last night a little bit, just speaking about what that does truly mean. From your perspective, and if you're asked that by somebody, what is the answer? Yeah. And how does that line up with the truth? Yeah. And of course, speaking of the word.
And I think that's the fact that when that question gets asked and people can't answer it shows the confusion that we live in a society right now. And people are begging for clarity, and we're dancing around this. And so, if I'm asked, like, what is a man? There's the biological side, right? Everybody knows right now, like, if you look at the chromosomes, there's a difference, right? And by definition of a woman is in contrast to what a man is. What a man is in contrast to a woman. So you have to kind of define both at the same time, because part of defining one is showing the contrast of two. So even if you did a forensic and you went to a grave and you dug it up and you didn't know it was an unmarked grave, and you went to it, it was 100 years ago, and you bring the bones up and you're like, is this a male or female? You do the forensics, the DNA is going to tell you that's a woman or that's a man, right? So there's a biological that's very clear. Chromosomes, reproductive organs, those sort of things. I think like that's kind of the easy answer. There's a difference between a man and a woman. But we're more than just biology. Who we are as a person, the holistic part of who we are. I think the thing that I wrestle with right now is a couple of things. And this is, I'm going to give you from a Bible's perspective, because that's what we're doing. We have a lot. The book of Romans tells us that chaos is unfolding on earth. God talks about this. And one of the ways that chaos is happening, it says that creation, because we are created by God. God is the creator. Bible tells us in Genesis 1 that God created male and female in his image, but he created them distinctively, male and female. In Romans chapter 1, what happens is creation starts worshiping creation instead of worshiping the creator. I think what you're seeing right now is creation is trying to define creation by creation's terms. Mm-hmm. We're not asking the creator. So like if I came to you and you're an artist, which you actually are, you've done some great pieces. You're the man of many talents. You could like give you any tool and you can create something amazing. But let's say I come to your garage and I'm walking in your garage. And I'm like, man, that's a crazy, awesome piece of work. And it might be even say abstract, right? And I go, Mike, you're the creator. You're the one that put that together. By creator, you're the one that gets to define what it is. Mm-hmm. And I think like right now, what we need to do, if we're asking this question, what is a man, what is a woman? Let's ask the creator who created the creation. What does he say? And I think right now what creation wants to do is creation wants to say, no, I'm going to define for myself. I think that's where we're gotten off track. So we need to come back and go, we are created beings, men and women, and we need to go to the creator and ask him, how do you want to define us? You're the one that set this whole thing in motion. So I think that we have to do that to help get some clarity.
And I always kind of ask, what's the point? And when I hear things like, and we know the language gets hijacked, which it has. And then I was reading yesterday, Disney will no longer say welcome boys and girls. They're not going to define it.
Right.
What's the point?
Yeah.
I don't, other than to just, I don't know. I honestly, and we're grace filled and I want to understand, but we get, and people who ask those questions oftentimes get so bullied for even asking the question. What is the point of that? And other than, I guess, some feeling like things are so broken, they want to completely dismantle, destroy, and then rebuild in their image. And I don't know if that's it or not, but I honestly ask the question at times. And I ask it, I think, from a loving place. What's the point of that?
Yeah. Well, I think when we talk about warfare and battle, this is what doesn't get talked about a lot. You have God creating humanity, sets it in motion with a purpose and a plan. And you look at right now, there's all this confusion between what is a man, what's a woman, and we're fighting for equality. And I think these are loaded words. And there's God's definition of what is equality, and then the world defines it. And when I say the world, when you look at the Bible, there is an operator behind the world system, which is the devil. The devil has always been at odds to push against whatever God designs. You see that in the Garden of Eden. God shows up and says, here's paradise. I mean, who wouldn't want that? I mean, come on. Like Adam and Eve, dude, you got this perfect wife. You're perfect. Marriage is awesome. You can eat from anything you want. I mean, come on. Why would you pick the one tree? And Satan shows up and says, don't trust God. That's at the root of every lie. Satan wants to disrupt and distort what God desires is best for us. And he does it with lies and deception. And lies and deception creates confusion.
But comes off as almost trying to offer something that's a positive for the moment, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why the Bible tells us that Satan masquerades as an angel of light. So like nobody wakes up one day and is like, I think today I'm going to totally worship Satan. Well, I guess there are some. But nobody wakes up with that intentionality. He's so good at counterfeit. He's so good at convincing you. And I think he plays to our own flesh, which is our desire to make us the center of everything. So we live in a culture right now, which is actually you're God. I'm God. That's what culture says.
You be you.
You be you. And it puts you at the throne, not God.
I hate when I hear you be you.
Yeah.
Just go you be you, dude.
Right.
And I always hear that and think, really?
Yes.
Is that what we're really supposed to be all about?
It's exactly it. And we call it relativism, right? I mean, that's the language that's used for how do you define what is right or wrong, morality. It's, well, whatever you want, Mike. It's whatever you think is right or wrong. So we're living in an age and time where I think we have so elevated creation over the creator. And as a result of that, everything's on my terms, not on God's terms. And as a result of that, it leads to confusion. Imagine if you wake up one day and I go, let's use a sporting now, because I tell this in the locker room with the Blazer guys. I go, imagine if you go into the game tonight and there's no refs and there's no rules. And you can do whatever you want. It's up to you to define. That's chaos. Come on, that's freaking chaos. Now, there's about 10 seconds we'd all love to see it.
Yeah, sure.
That'd be the best show, right? But nobody wants, it's not sustainable. Chaos is never sustainable. There has to be order. Well, who gets to decide order? And this is what I'm saying. The one who created creation gets it. And he did create order. But Satan wants us to be convinced. He lies to us and says, don't trust his order. You get to decide for yourself. It started in the garden, and it's amplified in our world and culture right now. And that's why you're seeing, I mean, if everybody gets around to decide what's right or wrong, if everybody gets to decide what's male or female for them, it's going to create a culture of confusion. And that's why if somebody's on a stand and go, I can't answer this. And that's I'm just describing symptomatically the issue of the culture that we're living in. And I think the other thing too is when we try to fight for equality, in Genesis, God said he created male and female equally. There is equality. We're all image bearers. Of course there is. Women are created in the image of God. We as men should cherish them as and equal image bearers of God. There's dignity, there's honor, respect in that. The problem is our culture wants to redefine equality, and really what culture is now is implying is sameness. there's a big difference between equality and sameness. You can have equality and diversity, meaning, yes, we are equal image bearers, men and women, but God created us distinctively. And there's a role that we as men play, and there's a role that women play, because God said, I want to express myself through humanity. And so I'm going to express myself uniquely through women. I'm going to express myself uniquely through men. And when we try to convolute that, we actually miss out on the unique beauty that are in women and the unique beauty of the way that God created men. And so I think we need to fight for equality, but equality on God's terms. Equality on Satan's or the world's terms is going to lead to just more confusion.
So then and I think most people can agree, if the moral compass of society has ossified to the point where we're at this level, and I always feel, and you were talking about the world, and oftentimes when I was discussing things like social media, I don't feel like that's real life. And I even like Twitter, where I tend to use it as my news feed, and I know I shouldn't. And then I'll read stats that, very 2 or 3% of the entire users are the people that actually post, and they all kind of have an agenda. But back to my point, if we have gotten so off track, and if the moral compass is so broken, how do you get it rectified? How do, in this day and age of instant gratification and a short attention span, and that I think was with a lot of people that I talk to, and even people that I'll invite to church, from maybe just more of a reason of trying to give a baseline and maybe a referee, to put it in those terms. But they go, what do I do with this? And you hand them, you're like, here's the Bible.
Yeah.
Have fun with that.
Right.
And they open it up and say, what in the world? Where do I even start with this?
Yeah.
I think the place, and I'm not answering the question that I just asked, but in community and within some kind of fellowship, I think that's how you can create a discussion, which sometimes can be uncomfortable, that can maybe lead us back. But what is your thought on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question, is where do we go? Like, we're trying to remedy this, and you throw the Bible out there, you're like, where? Where do I start? Do I start in the one passage where they're chopping off foreskins? I mean, by the way, that's in the Bible. There's some crazy, you read stuff like that, you're like, I don't know what to do with that. Like, help me out, right?
There's a lot.
That's why I love the Bible. There's some just awesome stories in there. And there's purpose behind those things. And that's the fun part of being a student of the Bible, is to realize, man, there's like layers of an onion. You peel it back, you go, wow, there's so many amazing things here. I come back to this thing. It's going to sound very, very trite, and it is absolutely the bullseye of the mark, is we look to Jesus. And so I tell people, start in the Gospels. And what are the Gospels? It's in the New Testament. It's the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It's the story of the life of Jesus. And when you want to get things recentered, redefined, back on track, you go to him, and it gives us clarity. Adam in the garden was considered the first man, right? And he failed his job. Eve was the one that was tempted. And it said that Adam was sitting there on his watch. He did nothing. So I tell people, the first sin of men, the human race, when it comes to men, is passivity. Did nothing.
He was sitting checking Twitter.
Yeah, exactly. Totally.
Right.
It's like, what's Eve doing over there? Hang
sure,
on
okay.
And then you see from that point on that masculinity, instead of it being the way God created, it got broken. And it became about self-centeredness, right? And that's why you see masculinity in an unhealthy way or sinful way. It does take on some bad personifications. And so then what happens is you have men that can be abusive. You have men that can be domineering, and men that can be overly aggressive. I mean, all these things, you go, yeah, okay, that's not good. And you see people try to remedy that. Like, oh, let's go to hyper-masculinity. So let's just kind of try to be more machismo and macho. And then you got guys that are on the other side of the spectrum, which are, guys that are confused. They don't know where they're at. And so we got to go to Jesus. He's the source, because he was the perfect man. And he invites us that when we follow him, he'll help us. We don't have to try to do it in our strength. He's like, I'll help you. I'm going to give you the power to see your life reflect my image. That's the goal of keeping him at the center of that.
And it seems like as people start down the road of investigating that, what I always hear mostly guys say is, or at least imply, I don't deserve that. I can't receive that. I'm not a good receiver either. And I think a lot of my battles are based around what I think I deserve. And I heard a great sermon once, which ended with, God's in the business of giving you exactly what you don't deserve. So getting over that line and over that wall of, it's been done for you. All it takes is acceptance now. But that's so much easier said than done.
Right.
So in that battle of receiving this, receiving the good news, receiving the word, and then receiving really what your value is, we talked about this a little bit last night in terms of how you are viewed, and always trying to keep in mind and see yourself the way God sees you is what my father-in-law used to always tell me. How do you explain that to men in a way that they can maybe feel like they deserve it and then understand even remotely how to receive it?
Yeah. I think that when we talk about earning and receiving, you talk about value and worth. And the way that we determine value and worth, there's value earned and value attributed. At the end of the day, actually, none of us deserve anything. I mean, the Bible tells like we're all kind of sinful people, right? And so do I deserve God's love? God doesn't operate that, because that's conditional language. You know, you figure out your life, then I'll give you my love. That's not how God operates. God is an unconditional loving God. So he goes, I give you worth, not because you earned it. I attribute it to you. Like you probably have things, like I have an old toolbox that was my dad's. And, you know, it's just beat up. It sits in my truck. It's a beat up toolbox. This thing it's rusted. It barely stays together. I got some of my dad's tools in there because he passed away 20 some years ago. That toolbox in and of itself has no value. Like it has no value to anybody else, but it has value to me. So I attribute value to it. It has meaning because of the value I place on it. That toolbox in and of itself has no value, but it has value because of what I place on it. All of us are the same way. We're all that broken, rusted, dirty toolbox. And God's like, oh, I know that. You don't have to get yourself polished and clean. I'm going to attribute value to you. I think if we as men, imagine not having to wake up every day trying to fight for your value and worth, but resting in the value and worth that he gives us.
Yeah. To go back even further, and we were talking about not necessarily roles in society, but it seems like some of that with men and women now and these blurred lines of what that truly means. The thing to remember, and it's hard to put ourselves back in the time, back in history when Jesus was physically roaming the earth as a man. He was the original, you could argue, during that time, champion for women's rights.
Absolutely.
Which people miss, I think, a little bit until you read the story of Lazarus and until you get to the Easter story with Mary and Martha. Women were chosen to first be informed of the news, and then back then, and that's where we'll talk about apologetics at some point, and that's where you're explaining historical fact. If they really wanted this, you would think, from a marketing standpoint, to be accepted back then, they wouldn't have used women to do this,
right? Because
it just wasn't the way of the land at that point.
Exactly.
But I always remind people of that when they talk of the roles and perhaps some language that would put women on a lower status of men at that time. But I will say, and I will submit, that there are plenty of stories in the Bible where women are elevated equal or above men.
Absolutely.
And I think that's something to remember.
Oh, the Bible's a revolutionary, just brilliant work of God trying to show and restore back to what the garden was meant to be. You know, garden was that place of equality in God's terms, and it was a place of dignity, value, worth. And then, of course, sin just kind of screwed up everything, right? And that's why, to hit on this too, with feminism, and I'm just going to be honest about it, I think feminism is so dangerous. And I'll tell you why. Because the world can identify problems, but the world's solutions make the problems worse. And so sin is the problem. I read a book the other day, and the woman said, you know what the problem is with masculinity is just masculinity is evil. I'm like, no, masculinity is not evil. Sin is evil, and sin can make men or women, hard. And so you look at feminism, And it started off with trying to correct where men were overpowering, over dominant, and weren't treating women with equality. And so there was some validity to that. But then the different waves of feminism end up, the second wave is now not that women and men are equal. Now it's men are actually unnecessary. And now we're in a wave where men are evil.
You sent me a quote the other day. I don't know if this is a page from that book or not. I read it. I'm like, whoa. And it's on this very thing. And I just went, that's exactly right. And it's scary.
Yeah. So the solution to remedying broken manhood or masculinity is not to adopt other broken worldly systems like feminism, although they may make a valid point of diagnosis, but it's not the solution. Jesus is the solution. And that's what you were saying is when we come to him, we go, okay, what should my framework look like for what does it mean to be a man? Jesus embodied that in where like he treated everybody with dignity and respect and honor. Women were lifted back up and he gave them that high place of honor. And Jesus was also, I mean, as masculine as it gets, turning over tables and like there was him calling things out and being strong and bold and courageous, but he embodied, that's why I keep coming back to Jesus is the bullseye of how we want to live, what masculinity looks like.
Well, in terms of resources, if people want to hear more about this, I mean, you don't talk specifically about this stuff in the Vertical Pursuit book, but do you, and I don't want to catch you off guard, but what are other resources for men in this? I know you're going through this right now in a lot of your research and a lot of your studies.
Yeah. Hoping that's why I'm hoping to put together. We're going to work on this a resource for men. Around what is the idea, like we were talking about vintage masculinity, vintage going to throw back to Jesus as our vintage hero when it comes to what masculine looks like. But I just encourage, get in the story of Jesus. Like that just start with like the Gospel of Matthew or Luke, John. I think those are where you're going to go, man, that's what Jesus like. But you do it with a different lens. Instead of just trying to read it now with like, oh, that's what it looks like to be a man. He did that and he did that. And I think that will be our greatest source of clarity and inspiration. Back to your original question. What does it mean to be a man? There's the biological start, but that's kind of easy. But the essence of a man is when we look at Jesus.
Well, I mentioned the Vertical Pursuit book. That is available online on our website as well, verticalpursuit.org. And of course, you found the website or with the webcast podcast. So we appreciate you listening and we look forward to you tuning in to the next episode. So for Mike Tatlock, I'm Mike Barrett. Thank you for watching and listening. We'll see you again real soon. We invite you to subscribe to our podcast, comment, or message us, and check out our website at verticalpursuit.org. Download the VP app and check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.